I still remember the moment it started, though nobody said a word about it. We were 3 friends gathered at the trailhead on a misty morning, packs leaning against the truck like soldiers ready for duty. The air smelled of wet pine and river mud, and we all knew we were heading into the backcountry for 4 days. That's when I noticed it, the way each of us glanced at the other's gear, trying to size it up. Mike swung his pack onto his shoulders with a grunt, straps creaking as if under protest. He always had a way of over-preparing, spare clothes for every weather, a stove big enough to cook for a family of 6, and I swear once even a cast-iron skillet. Then there was Jordan, who was the opposite. He strutted around like some kind of minimalist monk. His pack looked so flat I half expected him to pull out a loaf of bread and call it dinner. Me? I was somewhere in between. I liked my comforts, a decent sleeping pad, a little coffee pot, maybe even a paperback novel tucked away. But I hated the idea of carrying more than I needed. As we hoisted our packs and started up the first slope, I felt that quiet tension. Nobody said anything, but it was there. The challenge of who had packed smartest, who would suffer least, and who would be exposed as the fool who thought they needed 3 extra pairs of socks. The forest was heavy with fog, our boots squelching on damp earth. Birds stirred somewhere high in the canopy, and every once in a while a drop of water fell from the leaves onto our hats. The trail wound steadily upward, and soon enough that competition began to show. Mike's breathing turned rough, and he started shifting his straps every few minutes. Jordan, of course, walked light as a deer, humming as he went, while I kept glancing back and forth, torn between smugness and doubt. That's the thing about backpacking. It isn't just about the trail or the distance. It's about what you chose to carry, what weight you decided you could live without. And as we pressed deeper into the woods, I could tell that this trip was going to turn into more than just a hike. It was going to be a test, not only of endurance, but of pride. The fog thinned as the day wore on, and the forest began to glow with that warm late morning light that makes every fern and mossy rock look like something out of a handful. But we knew what this meant. Mike's load was already shrinking. Jordan, meanwhile, carried himself with a smug kind of ease. His pack hardly seemed to touch him, and he'd found a long stick to use as a walking staff. He'd whistle every so often, just to rub it in. But his pride got the better of him when lunchtime came. We settled by a stream, our boots off, socks steaming in the sun. Mike dug out tortillas and a whole jar of peanut butter, luxuries, sure, but they tasted like heaven after the climb. I brewed up a pot of cowboy coffee on my little tin percolator, the smell filling the air. Jordan? He reached into his pack and pulled out a single, squashed protein bar. He held it up like a joke, but his grin faltered when Mike and I split a second tortilla stuffed with raisins and peanut butter. "I pack light," Jordan said, chewing slowly, "because I prefer to let the land provide." Not 10 minutes later, he was eyeing my coffee like a wolf staring down a rabbit. He didn't ask, and I didn't offer. At least, not yet. The competition was subtle, but it was there. Mike had weight but comfort. Jordan had freedom but hunger. And I sat somewhere between, wondering which side of the line I'd fall on before the trip was through. As the sun slid westward and the shadows lengthened, we hiked higher into the ridge country. The breeze cooled, carrying the scent of spruce, and far below we caught glimpses of the river flashing like glass. Our packs creaked with each step, straps digging into shoulders. I found myself listening, really listening to those sounds. Mike's labored breaths, Jordan's light footsteps, and my own steady rhythm. Each sound was part of that silent competition, each telling a story of choices made before we'd ever set foot on the trail. By the time we reached a flat ridge with a view that seemed to stretch forever, the first day's truth was clear. The lightest pack didn't always mean the best journey, and the heaviest didn't always mean you were prepared. The balance was what mattered, and as we set down our gear for the night, I had a feeling that balance was going to shift in unexpected ways before the trip was over. Night on the ridge came colder than any of us expected. The sky was gone so light he barely had a sleeping bag at all. Just a thin quilt and a foam sheet that looked better suited for a kid's nap mat. By midnight, I could hear him shivering through the nylon walls. I lay awake, my own pack serving me well enough, warm but not stifling, firm but not rocky. Still, I felt a twinge of guilt listening to Jordan's teeth chatter. Around 2 a.m, the fire long since burned to embers, he finally broke the silence. "Hey," he called out, voice muffled. "You guys warm enough in there?" Mike gave a groggy grunt of agreement. I just said, "Yeah." There was a pause, then Jordan chuckled weakly. "Good. Means I'm losing." His laugh was thin, but it carried that stubborn pride. Even freezing in the dark, he couldn't let go of the competition. By dawn, frost clung to our tents like lace, and every breath hung in the air. Mike emerged from his shelter looking fresh, rested, and smug, but his victory was short-lived. When he went to make breakfast, he discovered that his fuel canister had leaked overnight, leaving him with nothing but a useless stove. Jordan perked up at that, rubbing his hands for warmth. "Guess that's the price of carrying a kitchen," he said, through a grin that still looked blue around the edges. I pulled out my small alcohol stove, barely more than a tin cup with holes punched in it, and set water to boil. The little flame danced cheerfully, heating just enough for coffee and oatmeal. Suddenly, both Mike and Jordan were leaning in, their eyes locked on that pot as though it held the sun itself. For the first time, the scales tipped in my favor. That morning, as the sun spilled gold over the ridge and thawed the frost from our packs, I realized the unspoken competition wasn't really about weight at all. It was about judgment, the gamble each of us had made in what we chose to carry or leave behind. And as the miles stretched out ahead of us, I had the sneaking suspicion that those choices were about to cost us more than pride. By the second afternoon, the ridge trail had narrowed into a rocky spine, with cliffs dropping steep on both sides. The sun was high and merciless, the air thin and dry, and every step tested our balance, and he cursed every step. "I'm carrying a river," he puffed, "and it feels like it." Me, I'd carried just enough. Not comfortable, not abundant, but enough. When we stopped in a patch of shade, Jordan finally caved. He stared at my bottle like a starving man at a feast. "Trade?" he asked, voice raw. "I'll give you, He fumbled in his pack and pulled out a crumpled protein bar, the same kind from the day before. Mike chuckled, nearly choking on his breath. "You're not going to bribe anyone with that brick, pal." But then he sat back, groaning as he shrugged off his massive pack, and admitted, "Though I'd pay good money to ditch about 5 pounds right now." The three of us sat there, panting, surrounded by silence broken only by cicadas buzzing in the heat. The competition had stopped being a joke. Jordan was running on fumes, Mike was drowning in his own supplies, and I sat in the middle, unsure if I'd chosen wisely or just gotten lucky. That evening we stumbled into a campsite near a stand of old spruce. A trickle of water ran nearby, just enough to refill bottles and splash our faces clean. Relief swept over us, but the balance had shifted again. Jordan had proved that light packing could be dangerous. Mike had proven that heavy packing could be misery. And me? I was realizing that being in the middle meant sooner or later I'd be the one put to the test. As we lit a fire and stretched our weary legs, Mike and Jordan both leaned on me, literally and figuratively. "Your stove, your coffee, your sense of direction," Mike said, pointing at me with a stick. "You're keeping us alive out here." Jordan nodded, teeth no longer chattering but eyes still shadowed from his brush with thirst. "Guess the prize for packing light," he said softly, "is that someone else ends up carrying your weight." The words hung there, heavy as the smoke curling into the night. That's when it dawned on me. The real competition wasn't about the packs at all. It was about trust. who could be counted on when the trail got hard. And I had a sinking feeling that before our trip was done, that truth was going to be tested in a way none of us expected. On me, his light pack now meaningless against his exhaustion. Every few steps I'd hand him water or a bite of food. He'd nod thanks, but his pride kept him from saying more. The valley floor brought us to a river crossing. The water was cold, swift from recent rains, and we had to ford it to reach the trail out. Mike, stubborn as a mule, tried to cross first with his overloaded pack. Halfway through he lost his footing and went down hard, soaked to the bone. His stove, his extra clothes, even his overstuffed trail mix bag, all waterlogged and useless. He climbed out sputtering, shoulders slumped. That left Jordan staring at the river like it was a wall. His pack might have been light, but his strength was spent. I knew right then he wasn't going to make it alone. So I shifted my gear, tightened my straps, and helped steady him as we crossed together. The current tugged hard, icy water biting at our legs, but we made it through without going under. On the far bank, he sank down on a rock, breathing like he'd just outrun a storm. By the time we reached the trailhead that afternoon, the contest was over, though none of us said so. Packs came off with groans, backs straightened, and we all stood there staring at the truck like it was salvation itself. Mike's gear was heavy but ruined, Jordan's was light but lacking, and mine was somewhere in the middle, just enough, but only because I'd been lucky, and because the others had leaned on me. We didn't crown a winner. Instead, we drove home in quiet laughter, trading jokes about root beer-loving bears and tents that blow away in the wind, as if trying to bury the lesson under humor. But I carried it with me, the truth that out there, weight isn't measured in pounds, it's measured in trust, in what you carry not for yourself, but for the people walking beside you. And ever since that trip, whenever someone shoulders their pack with a grin and brags about how light it is, I just smile, let them brag, and keep my own quiet counsel. Because I know now, the heaviest thing in the backcountry isn't a cast iron skillet or a bag of trail mix. It's responsibility, and that's a weight no one can measure until the trail puts it on your shoulders.